Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin a new Masechta Bava Kama, which is also a new Seder Nezikin. Masechta Bava Kama is the first of the three Bavas, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra. The Gemara says in one place that according to one man Da'ama, the three Bavas are really one Masechta. It discusses the Mili de Nezikin, or this is Dine Mominus. All the various different Dine Mominus are in these three Bavas. And Bava Kama discusses primarily Takadinian of Nezikin, all the halachas of when you damage someone else's properties or possessions. Masechta Bava Metzia discusses Be'ikr Toyim V'nitten, all kinds of Dinei Teira arguments and discussions regarding money matters. And Masechta Bava Basra discusses things that relate mostly to land ownership and things like that, karkois. But they're all considered to be one Masechta. The Gemara says in the end, there's a Mishnah at the end of Bava Basra that says, Haroitze lahachkim yasek b'dinei mominus. If you want to become wise, you should learn the Masechtas that discuss dinei mominus, because these Masechtas are the areas in Teire which have the deepest svaras in them. So we're entering into these Masechtas where you have to pay more attention to the inyanim that the Gemara says, because this is the deepest inyanim in Teire. There's also the famous Gemara that's here later in Masechta Bava Kama where it says, Haroitze l'mahavi chasida. If a person wants to be a chassid, so he should be mekayim mili de nezikin. There's another statement the Gemara says he should learn mili de avis, he should learn Masechta avis. But the Gemara also says if you want to be a chassid, be mekayim what it says in Seder Nezikin. Sometimes we look at these three darim of Masechtas of Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, that it's talking about all kinds of money disputes and issues and damages, and what that's not necessarily relevant to me. What do I take from this? But the Gemara says that there's a general thing that you have to understand from all of this, that you see how the Torah looks at the money and the possession, a penny of another Yid, and a person that wants to be a chassid. How is that expressed? By the fact that he has the zehiras, that he's very careful with not taking one penny from another Yid that doesn't belong to him. That's here the general message that you get out of all these Masechtas, the understanding of how you treat HaTorah Chasam Amayim Shal Yisrael. Another thing, when you get to these Masechtas, what it says in Zayar and in Kabbalah and Chassidus, and the Rebbe brings this in a few places, the Rebbe spoke about this in Parshas Mishpatim, Tavshin and Beis as well, that the three Bavas of Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra is connected to the different Golosin. The Seder Nezikin shows in a time period of Golos. Nezikin, that's what Nezikin means, when there's a damage, when there's a disconnect. Before we learned Masechta Kiddushin, which talks about the connection, the Kiddushin of Ish v'Isha, the Eivish and Yidden come together. These Masechtas are related to the union of Golos, and B'derech Mamela also related to the union of Geula. The fact that it's divided into three Masechtas, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, is related to the three Geulas, the three Batim Mikdashes that come from the Golasin. That's Al Pi Chassidus what the union of these Masechtas are all about. And when you learn about these subjects and you mevader how Torah tells you to deal with this matzav of nizakin when there's a damage that takes place, how you pay and how you get out the truth of the arguments between people, that's mevader the Cheshach HaGalos. Concept of the Zikin is the Cheshach of Galus, and the Torah is giving you the light and the guidance of how to deal with it, which elevates us out of Galus. So learning these subjects is really being mevader and elevating us out of the Galus and bringing us to the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, which is Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, the three Batim Mikdashes. Okay, let's begin. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Arba Avos Nezikin. There are four different avos. Avos is literally fathers, which means general concepts that the Torah said. For the different kinds of damages, it's divided into four, which says in the Psukim. These are the ones that say clearly in the Torah, in Parshas Mishpatim. Hashoir, the ox that gores. V'haboir, and a pit. If you dig a pit and someone gets damaged inside of it. V'hamaveh. So we'll see in the Gemara, there's an argument what maveh refers to. One opinion is it refers to niskei adam, person that damages. Another opinion is that it's also a shar that damages, but not by goring with its horns, but with its teeth, what it eats. V'hahever, and the hever, which is fire. And so the Mishnah here brings it in the same order, the way it's in the pasuk. These are the way it's in Parshas Mishpatim. Now says the Mishnah, the Torah said all of these, and you can't learn them out from one another. Lo yarei shar k'arei maveh. You can't compare shar, the ox that gores and damages, to maveh. And you can't compare maveh to shar. The Torah has to write both of them. Here, the Mishnah sort of skips. It's interesting. It starts with the order of Shoyer, Boyer, and Maveh. It skips over from Shoyer to Maveh. It doesn't say Shoyer and Boyer. Rashi says the reason is because if it would say Lo Yareya Shoyer Kareya Boyer, so then what would basically come out is that if the Torah would only write Shoyer and Boyer, it wouldn't have to write anything else. You could learn from there the other two as well. Okay, but the Gemara will explain this. We'll see. The Mishnah here wants to point out that if the Torah would write Shoyer and Maveh, so then you wouldn't be able to learn out anything else from these two, because these two have a similarity. Both Shoyer and Maveh, as the Mishnah here says right away, that they both have a Ruach Chaim. Both of these are a damage that comes from a certain source that has a life to it. Boyer is a pit which has no life to it. So therefore the Mishnah here is comparing Shoyer to Maveh. And also the Mishnah wants to say, even though Shoyer and Maveh have a certain similarity, they both are something which has a Ruach Chaim, it's something that has life to it, and that's how it damages, but they're still not the same. Then the Mishnah continues, V'lo yarei Maveh karei Shoyer, you can't compare Maveh to Shoyer, and V'lo zeh v'zeh sheyesh b'hem Ruach Chaim, you can't compare these two, both. Shoyer and Maveh is a damage that comes from a source that has life to it. You can't compare it to fire. Fire has no life to it. And you can't compare Shoyer and Maveh and Eish. So even though they're not the same, Shoyer and Maveh have life, and Eish is fire. That doesn't have a Ruach Chaim to it, but still, they're all compared in the sense that Darkan Leilech Lahazik. That the nature of all these three is that it moves. It goes from one location to another on its own. So therefore, this is something you have to be careful with. Kareya bar, but you can't compare this to a pit that a person digs. Shein darkei leilech lahazik. It doesn't move anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. If you dig a pit, it is where it is, and whoever gets damaged in it, he walked into this pit. Okay, so what's the point that the Mishnah is trying to say here? L'chayri, you would think that all the Torah has to say is one example of a case of when a person's possessions, a person's ox, a person's pit that he dug, was mazik someone else, and I would learn from there that regarding any case, that if you mazik someone, you're liable and you have to pay. Why does the Torah have to say for these four different oves? So what the Mishnah is pointing out of here, and we'll see more details in the Gemara about this, that no, if you would only say one, I would say that this one has a unique nature that demands a certain level of responsibility. You own an ox, it's a living being, and it runs around, and it could be wild. That demands you to be careful with it. A fire is not a living being. It's not the same thing. Maybe I don't have to be careful with that. And then a boyer is something which is just a pit. If someone gets damaged, he walked into the boyer that I dug. I didn't bring my boyer to him. I didn't allow my boyer to go to him. So the Mishnah here is saying that the Torah had to write all of them because you cannot learn one from another. But however, now that we see that the Torah wrote everything, so what do we learn out from here? Hatzad hashavish behen. What's the common denominator from all these four ovis mazikin? Shedarkan lahazik. It's their nature to cause damage. Ushmirasan alecha, and to guard them, that they should not cause damage. The Torah obligates you to guard them. Ukeshehizik, and when it does damage, chav hamazik l'shalem tashlumei nezek. The mazik, the owner of these possessions that causes this damage, has to pay b'mei tavaretz. And you have to pay from the best of your properties. If you're paying from karka, as we'll see in the Gemara, there's usually the karkos, the properties are divided into three levels. There's idis, the best, there's beininis, there's a middle level, and there's ziburis, there's an inferior level of karka. You have to pay from the best when you are a mazik. Zok the Gemara midiktani ovis. The Mishnah here says that there are four ovis, fathers. Meklal deiketel. From this we understand that there are offsprings, there are derivatives from these ovis nazikin that are not clear in the pasuk. And the Gemara is soon going to give us example what those teilis are. But before that, the Gemara wants to know teildeseya and kayetze, these derivatives that we learn from the ovis, do they have the same halacha like the ovis nazikin themselves? Or maybe they don't have the same halacha like the Av itself. The Av is written befurish in the Torah. There are certain teilis that we learn out, and the teilis don't have the exact same halacha as the Av. Says the Gemara, here we find other places also a similar concept, a Av and a teilda. And sometimes the teilda, an offspring, has the same halacha as the Av, as the father, and sometimes not. Gabe, again, benigea to the halachas of payment. Over here regarding the Zikin, the main thing that's relevant is the Teilda. They have the same din of payment like the Av. So where else do we find the concept of Avos and Teildas? Gabe Shabbos Nan. So by the malachas of Shabbos, we also have the Mishnah that says Ovis malachas aboam chasa achas. That what are the Ovis malachas also referred to as Ovis fathers? So there are 39. So Ovis, if it says that they are Ovis, Meklal Telda. So you see that they are offsprings. So over there, Telda saying Kayetzeben. The offsprings, if a person's Machal Shabbos, whether it's an Av Malacha or it's a Telda, it's the same. It's the same punishment. What's an example of an Av and a Telda? Just to give one example, Teichen is a Malacha. If a person is grinding something on Shabbos, that's the Malacha. That's an Av. If a person slices something into very, very thin pieces, that's just a Telda. It's similar to the Av, that you're taking one piece and splitting it up and dividing it into small pieces, but it's not mamish crushed, so that's called a Telda. Whether you do the Av, whether you do the Telda, the Einish is the same, as the Gemara says, Loishna Av, just like by the Av itself, Chatas. So if it's done b'shegig, you bring a carbon Chatas. And so Loishna Telda Chatas, the same is also the Telda, you bring a Chatas. Loishna Av, the father, if you do the Malacha itself, it's Skila. If it's done b'mezit, it's Chi of Skila. And Loishna Telda is Skila, for the Telda also Chai of Skila. So that's when it comes to Shabbos. Now here the Gemara clarifies regarding Shabbos, if that's the case, that the Av and the Telda is identical, same halacha, so then why is one called an Av and why is the other one called a Telda? There has to be some kind of a difference between them. So here first the Gemara says there has to be some practical difference in halacha by labeling this as an Av and this as a Telda. What is the difference between an Av and a Telda? Answers the Gemara, Nafkemine, the relevance is the ilu of it. Shtei ovis bahadi adadi. If a person is over on two ovis malachas together, inami shtei teldes bahadi adadi. A person does two teldes together. Mechayev akol chada v'chada. You bring a separate carbon chatos for each one separately. If you do chayrish and zeireya, there are two separate ovis. It's learned out from a pasuk which divides that you machalik that even though they're the same iser, but nevertheless, they're separated, and each one is a separate carbon chatas. But v'ilu ovid av v'telda didei. This is the relevance of this being labeled as an av and this being labeled as a telda. If you do one malacha, which is an av, and then you do another malacha, which is its telda, then lo mechayev alachada. You're only going to be chayev to bring one carbon chatas because it's the same gather of chilul Shabbos. It's the same. You're doing the same thing, so therefore you're not chayev a different carbon chatas. That's the relevance over there of it being called an Av and a Telda. But as far as the actual Einish is concerned, the Telda is the same as the Av. Now the Gemara brings another opinion about this. So Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that if a person does an Av malacha, and then he does another malacha which is its Telda, but still he says you're going to be chayiv twice for the Av and for the Telda. If so, amai karile Av, amai karile Telda. So then why is one referred to as an Av and the other is referred to as a Telda? What's the source of this distinction? Answers the Gemara, not because there's any relevance in halacha for this. Rather, it's the source of where it's learned out from. The ones, the 39 malachas, where do we get to the number 39 malachas? It's learned out from this that the Isser of Chilul Shabbos says in the Torah by Melechas HaMishkan. So we compare it to the Mishkan. So those malachas that were done in the Mishkan, those significant malachas that were done in the Mishkan, so they are called an Av. Those that were not in the Mishkan, chashive, and they're not significant over there in the Mishkan, karile telda. Those are referred to as a telda. Right? So for example, the teichen, it itself was a malacha done in the Mishkan when they made the samamonim for the ketayres, but then cutting into thin slices, that wasn't in the Mishkan. But because it's similar, so therefore it's a telda and it has the same malacha. And even if you do the Av and a Telda, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's like two different things, mamish, and you're going to be chayiv on each one separately. Right? But nevertheless, what's there in the Mishkan is the Av, and what was not in the Mishkan is called a Telda. So this is what? No difference, right? So this is one example where the Av and the Telda told the same kayetzebet. The halacha of the Telda is the same like the Av. Now, on the other hand, we find a case where the Telda does not have the same halacha as the Av. When it comes to various sources of Tumah, so it says in the Mishnah, Oveis HaTumais, what are the fathers? What are the sources of Tumah? There are three concepts of sources of Tumah. Hasheretz, a certain kind of creeping animal. V'Shichva Zera, and the Shichva Zera, the semen that comes out of a person's body that causes Tumah. And Tumei Meis, a person that touched a dead body, becomes an Ava Tumah as well. So over here, Tel Deseyem, Lav Kayetzeben. A secondary tumah, when a person touches this Av, and now he becomes a Rishon L'Tumah, right? There's the mace itself. The mace itself is the very first source that causes Tumah. That's called Avi Avaisa Tumah. The person that touches the mace is called the Ava Tumah. Then a Toilda is the person that touches the Ava Tumah, he becomes a Rishon L'Tumah. So over here, the Toilda is not Kayetzben, does not have the same halacha as the Av. Why? The Ilu Av, the Ava Tumah, Metama Adam V'Kelim. Whatever it touches food items, or even if it touches a human being, or it touches vessels, it makes it all tummy. V'ilu Toildis, but when it comes to the derivative, when it comes to the next level of tumah, which is a Rishon L'Tumah, Oichlin Mashkin Metame. If it comes into contact with food or drinks, then it becomes a Sheni L'Tumah. Adam V'Kelim Loi Metame. A human being or vessels do not become a Sheni L'Tumah from a Rishon L'Tumah. So there we see that the Toilda is a lesser level of tumah. Every level of tumah that you go down, another level down, is going to have a less tumah than the av, than the level before that. So over here I see that the Toilda does not have the same halacha as the av. So now the question is, hachamai. Over here regarding the Avos Nezikin, so there are the 4 Avos Nezikin, and then there are Toildas. Do the Toildas have the same halacha as the father, as far when it comes to payment, or not? Rav Papa answers, Yesh mehen kayetzeben. There are Toildas that are the same as the father, as the Avos of Nezikin. The Yesh mehen lav kayetzeben. And there are those Toildas that do not have the same halacha as the Avos. And now here the Gemara is going to explore when is it then that the Toilda is kayetzebay, and when is it that the Toilda is not kayetzebay. So here the next, it's interesting how the Masechta works. In the next few blot, the Gemara is going to go through Bekitzer, various different Avos Nezikin and its Toildas. Later on in the Masechta, it's going to go into much more details, each one separately, what their halachas are. But here, it like goes through Bekitzer, all the Avos and Toildas, trying to figure out if it's kayetzeben or not. Let's see. Tana Rabbanon, so we learned in the Braisig. Gimel Avos Nemru B'Shayr. The Shayr itself has 3 different Avos that are included in it, that are mefurish in the Torah. There's Hakeren, when a Shayr damages with its horns, v'hashein, v'haregel, and when it eats with his teeth, or regel, when it tramples with his feet. So what it's called Avos, because it says clearly in the Torah. So what are the psukim in the Torah for this? Keren min alon, the Tana Rabbanim, we learned in the Braise, ki yigach, the Torah says that if it will gore. Ein negiche, so the term of negiche, goring, and the Torah is ela bekeren. It means with its horns. Shenamar, and how do we know? Maybe negiche is some other way, with some other part of its body. How do we know it refers to the horns? Shenema, because there's a pasuk that says, "Vayasle tzidkiya ben Kenano karne barzel." He made horns out of iron horns. Vayeme koyam Hashem be'ele tenagach Aram. With this, you will gore Aram. You will kill Aram. So here we see that it uses this term of keren, and it says tenagach. That the keren, you're going to gore with them. So we see that the word negiche means with horns. Another source is, and this is a pasuk in Chumash, this is the bracha regarding Yosef, that he's b'chayr, he's like an ox, and he has a hadar loy v'karnei re'eim karnav, and he has horns like a re'eim. And behem amim yanagach, and with them, with these horns, he can gore the nations of the world. So you see over here again that a keren is yanagach. This is what negicha is related to. So the Gemara now explains why is it necessary to bring 2 psukim. 2 different sources that negicha is with a keren. My voimer, why do you need a second pasuk? Says the Gemara, because if you'll argue and say divrei Torah me divrei Kabbalah lo yalfinon, we're trying to figure out the meaning of the word kihigach in the Torah, and you're bringing me a source of a pasuk in Malachim, which is in Navi. You can't learn out the meaning of a word in Torah from what it says in Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the expression that means from Navi. So therefore Tashema, brought the pasuk that it says in Chumash, b'chay shoyrei hadaloi, what it says by Yosef in the pasuk in Chumash as well. But the Gemara doesn't accept this pshat. Because are we trying to learn out a certain halacha, a certain obligation, a certain chiyuv of what it says in Navi, and applying that back to what it says in the Torah? We're not trying to learn out a halacha here. Gili mil sabalmu. It's just a matter of translation of the word. We're just trying to figure out what's the correct translation of the word negicha, that it refers to goring with a horn. So why can the negicha bekarenu, that it means with a horn? Why can't I see that from the pasuk that it says in Navi? It says the Gemara, Ella, the pshat of here is as follows. Mao the time, if we would only bring the pasuk from Navi, then I would think to say ki palig rachmana bein tam lemuad. One of the chidushim that there is regarding the payment of an ox that gores with its horns are that there's a difference if it's the first 3 times and after 3 times. That's what's known as tam and muad. We're going to learn a lot about this in the Masechta here. Tam is the first 3 times when it gores, you only pay chatzi nezek, half a payment for what it did. Because the owner didn't realize that the animal is so wild, so therefore he only pays half. We'll discuss later exactly the sources for this, but that's a tam. The muad is after 3 times, so now you see that it already is accustomed to doing this, so there's a bigger level of responsibility. So then if it happens again, you have to pay nezek shalim. So this distinction between a tam and a muad, maybe I would think to say hanamili betlusha. Maybe this only is true if what happens if an ox takes a horn, which is not the horn that's on its head, a horn that's already detached, and this ox is so wild that it puts this horn into its mouth, and with this it goes and damages. That's something which is extremely unusual. In such a case, when an animal does something so unusual over here, maybe I would say that's when the Torah says that the first 3 times you only pay half a payment. But if the animal is goring with the horns that are attached to its head, so in such a case, even though this is also a wild animal doing this, but nevertheless, it's more normal. This is the Eibusha gives the animal, the shayr, its ox to gore to protect itself. So maybe I would say over here, even the first time it's a muad, this is something you could expect to happen, and you'll have to pay nezek shalim. Shema therefore brings the second pasuk. With here it says in the second pasuk, it's talking about horns that are connected to the animal's head. In the first pasuk, it's talking about karne barzel, metal or iron horns, which over there it's not talking about a horn that's connected to the body of the animal. But over here in the second pasuk, we see that it's talking about the horn on the head of the animal. And when it gores in this way, it's considered to be something which is the animal becoming wild, not something that the owner has to expect, and therefore there is the distinction of tam and muad, that the first 3 times you only pay half, even when it's goring with the horns attached to its head.
Why not just bring the second pasuk?
And a chanami, it could have brought only the second pasuk, but the Brais is bringing both of these psukim to clarify to you that you shouldn't think to make this distinction. So you should know now that that the halacha of keren applies either way. Okay, so that's keren itself. Now, told the keren maihi, what's the derivative of keren? Negife, if an animal goes and pushes with its body, and this is something that it's doing with a kavana to be mazik. It's not just pushing with its body because it's just walking and it by mistake pushes something. No, it got angry and it's pushing intentionally to go and be mazik someone. Or neshiche, it bites. And there the Gemara will clarify also, this biting over here is also biting not to eat, but with the intention to harm. And revitze, when the animal goes and lies down, also in a way that it wants to break something. It sees dishes and then wants to break it, so it lies down on it to break it. Or beite, if the animal kicks with its feet with the intention to harm and break. These are similar to keren. When an animal gores with its horns, it's not doing it for any of its own pleasure. No, it's doing it to damage. It's wild. It wants to damage and hurt someone. These are all tailors of keren because it has the same nature that it's being done with a kavana to be mazik. It's a wild animal. Right? And it's also the concept of it's 2 things. First of all, it's a kavana to be mazik, and this is something which an animal doesn't usually do. When an animal is calm and normal, it doesn't gore with its horns. It doesn't do all these kinds of things. So it's not something that it usually happens that an owner could expect to happen. Okay, so now the Gemara says the first tilde we mentioned here is negife, when the animal pushes with its body. So fragt the Gemara, Maishna negiche the kari la'av. So negiche, when it gores with its horns, that's a father, and that's a source that says in the Torah, because the chsiv ki yigach, the Torah says ki yigach if it gores. But negife namiksiv. Negife, when it pushes with its body, isn't that also something that says clearly in the pasuk? It says ki yigoif. In another pasuk it says ki yigoif shayr ish shayr eyu. So it also, Yigof is also in the pasuk. So the Gemara answers, Negichihi. There. What? Hi, sorry, missed the word. Yeah. Hi, Negichihi. When the Torah here says the term Yigof, it does not mean pushing with its body. Over there, it means Negiche, that it's goring with its horns. The Tanya, as we learned in the Brais explains this. If you look there in that pasuk, you'll see Pasach b'Negife. The Torah begins with the term Ki Yigof. But V'sayim b'negicha. Right afterwards, the Torah says the term of negicha, and the continuation of the pasuk, it says over there, Oy noida kishar nagachu. It starts off saying ki yigav, and then it says nagach. So why does it start with one term and it concludes with another term? Lai malacha, it comes to tell you, zui negife, zui negiche. It's coming to say that negife and negiche is one and the same thing. That when it says pushing, what does it mean over here with pushing? It means pushing through the horns. It pushes itself into another being with its horns. That's the taich. Okay, so negicha, the Gemara already clarified, the term negicha, we see from other psukim that it means dafka with the horns. So since it says there negicha, so therefore negifa is a general term, pushing. But pushing how? The animal puts force and pushes with its horns. So therefore, actual negifa with the body of the animal, not the horns, that's not mefurish in the Torah. Okay, but now here the Gemara goes a step further. There is 2 different times that the Torah speaks about the animal damaging with its horns. There's one time where it just says ki yigach. That's when the pasuk speaks about when an animal damages a human being. And then this other pasuk the Gemara brought, when it says ki yigoiv, that's talking about when the animal damages another animal. So the Gemara asks, why is it when it talks about the shirt that gores another a human being, dichsev ki yigach? Over there it uses just the term negiche. Why is it when it comes to an animal, the chsiv ki yigoif? Over there, the Torah uses the term ki yigoif, and later it says taka negicha. So yigoif there also means negicha. But why, when it comes to one animal goring another, why there does it use the term yigoif? Says the Gemara as follows. It says a difference. Adam the Islam mazala, a human being that has a mazal. The word that Rashi here, the first shot Rashi says is a human being has das. He has awareness. He can be careful if he sees an animal is about to attack him. So over here, ksiv ki yigach. Here the Torah uses a more of an extreme expression. An animal that ends up damaging a human being, it has to be an animal that was extremely wild. That the animal suddenly jumped upon the person with such a might and force that the person, even though he has awareness to look around him to see what's happening, he couldn't save himself from this animal. So the word ki yigach is a more extreme expression. That's by a human being. The heima de lasla mazala, an animal that doesn't have that kind of awareness, ksiv ki yigoif. Here the Torah uses the term ki yigoif, which means that the animal is pushing around and it pushes its horns into another animal. It's not coming with such a force and has the ability to damage another animal without such a great force. Okay, that's the difference in the nature of what it takes for an animal to damage a human being, much more wild than an animal that's just damaging another animal. Rashi here says another pshat regarding this inyan of a mazel, that the concept of a mazel is that a human being has a special mazel. And therefore, that an animal should kill a human being is not so simple, because the mazel that he has will save him. But since another behemoth does not have a mazel, so therefore to kill another animal is easier. Now, this is not stam. The Torah is not just telling us this difference stam as a story of a difference. This is an actual difference lahalacha here. And the Gemara explains what comes out from this. So now, milsa agavorcha kamashmalon. The Torah teaches me over here with this a halacha. And what is that? The mu'ed la'adam, if you see an animal that already gored and killed a human being 3 times, so now he becomes a mu'ed. We see that he's accustomed to doing this, and now you're going to be chayav to pay nezek shalem by an animal. When it gores and kills, you have to pay the kaifer for this that it killed and so on. So once this happens 3 times for a human being, have a mu'ed lebehemeh. You know that this animal is wild enough to kill a human being. He's for sure wild enough that he can kill another animal, and you have to be careful with this. And you're going to be chayav to pay nezek shalom if it kills another animal. Mu'ed lebehemeh, but when you have an animal which becomes a mu'ed and it's accustomed to being wild amongst the animals and it kills another animal, so yeah, the animal is wild to that degree, but le'av a mu'ed l'adam. An animal around other human beings, you don't have to be so careful that it's going to be so wild to kill a human being. So the mu'ed is not... there's different levels of a mu'ed. There's a mu'ed for Adam, there's a mu'ed for Behemoth. If it's mu'ed for Behemoth, it's not mu'ed for Adam. And that we learn from the difference in the lashon of the pasuk. By Adam, it uses a more extreme term, ki yigach, that it has to gore with bigger force than ki yigach by an animal. It doesn't have to gore with such a great force. Okay, so that this is the halacha of keren and the toildas of keren. Now the Gemara asks another detail here. What was the second toilda that it says regarding the toilda neshicha? That if the animal bites, so that's a toilda of keren. So the Gemara asks, neshicha toilda the sheni. Shouldn't biting be a toilda of shein? An animal eats The animal could eat and chew and swallow, and the animal could bite. That seems like it belongs to that part of the body which is related to the animal damaging with its teeth. Now, why is it related to the horns that the animal damages with? Says the Gemara, loy. No, it's not the same thing. Shein yeshanola zeka. The teeth. So when the animal damages with its teeth, so the animal is doing it for what purpose? It's doing it because it eats. It has pleasure of eating. Right? So therefore, this is something which is hana. This is something which is more usual. The animal eats all the time. Over here, we're talking over here about biting when the animal does something which is not usual for the animal. It's just biting in order to break something. So therefore, this is compared to the keren, even though it's with it's the teeth, but the nature of this damage is more compared to the goring, which is unusual. The last two tales we said over here regarding keren, when the animal lies down and it folds its feet, or ubi'ita, when it kicks with its feet. So it also is a tale of keren. So tale the regali. Wouldn't you think that this is a derivative? This is similar to regal, when an animal tramples, when it walks and tramples with its feet. Says the Gemara again, no, it's not the same thing. Loi. Regel hazeka motzui. When it comes to regel, that's the animal just walking. The animal walks, and as it walks, it tramples. It doesn't pay attention. So that's something which is very common. That's one type of hezek. And therefore you chayiv over there in nezek shalim the first time, because that's something that happens all the time. But hani ein hazeka motzui. Over here, their hezek is not motzui at all. It's not common because an animal to dafke, go with a kavanah to be mazik, to lie down or to kick, that's a different kind of a hezek. It's more similar to keren, which is not common for the animal to do. So this, over here, what do you see? The tolda of keren has the same halacha like keren itself. So over here, this is a tolda which is kayetzeben. The payment and the nature of this damage of the tolda is the same nature of the damage as the av, same thing. So Ella told the same lav kayetzeben. So what's the tolda that's not kayetzeben? Domer of Papa said, ahai, what is it going on? Ilema hani, if you're going to say it goes on the ones that we just mentioned, the tolda of keren, that can't be. Ma'ishna keren, what's the difference? Keren itself, which it says clearly in the pasuk, the kavanah lahazik. Keren is when an animal damages in an unusual way and it has a kavanah to be mazik, and this is your money. Ushmirasi alecha, and you have the obligation to guard it, that it shouldn't be mazik. So haninami, the toldos of keren is the same thing. Kavanasan lahazik, it's when the animal is being mazik with an intention. It's your money, shmirasan alecha, and you have to guard it. So this cannot be the tolda of, this is not a tolda which is not similar to the av. Ella said, so the Gemara concludes, tolda the regel, the keren that is, the tolda of keren is kekeren. Over here, Taka, this is a tolda which is the same as the av. When did Rav Papa say that we have a tolda that's different than the av? That's a shein v'regel. When it comes to the animal damaging with its teeth, shein v'regel, or with its feet, when it just walks naturally and tramples with its feet, over there is where we say the tolda saying is lav kayetzeben. As the Gemara is going to explain, first the Gemara is going to bring the source for shein v'regel in the Torah. A big arichas about what the source is in the Torah, then what the toldas are, and then it's going to show where you see tolda saying lav kayetzeben by shein v'regel.